morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. October is moving right along, and it's also one of the most exciting, out-of-this-world months that we do have here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. It's when we focus a lot of our events around space exploration. So, of course, we talk to astronauts, but we also bring in a lot of scientists, a lot of engineers, who work behind the scenes to make some of these amazing missions happen, exploring beyond our planet into our solar system and outwards into our galaxy and the universe beyond. And of course, turning that lens back to look at our own planet to help us understand it better. So we still have a lot of live events coming up this month, some in the worlds of science, exploration, adventure, and conservation as well. So visit exploringbytheseat.com. You can find all the events we have coming up, where to register, to grab a camera spot, or tune in live with your classrooms. All right. Well, let's jump into today's event. We are always excited to have celebrated NASA astronaut Terry Virts with us. He is the pilot of the space shuttle Endeavour and crew member on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. Terry has spent 200 consecutive days in space as commander of the International Space Station. This was one of the longest continuous space missions of any NASA astronaut. And so he got to really look at our planet from a really unique perspective. He helped install the outpost's 360-degree observation module, the Cupola, and that allowed him to take more pictures than any astronaut before him, allowing him to really see our planet, its beauty, its climate, the changes that are happening, and really where it fits in our universe. So I'm going to bring Terry in live with us right now. Hey, Terry, how you doing?
Hey, Joe, it's good to be here. I've got a sore throat because I was at the Astros baseball playoff game last night, yelling a lot.
Well, I'd be disappointed, and the students would be too, if you didn't give it your all while you were there. So good stuff, rooting for your team.
Trying to help them win, exactly.
All right, Terry. Well, we're going to let you take over for a little bit, take us on a little space adventure, and then we'll have a little Q&A action with our classrooms.
All right, I'm trying to share my screen, and hopefully you can see it now.
Looks good so far. I see it loading in the background. Perfect. We are good.
There we go. Okay. Well, I want to talk. It's great to have everybody online. I want to talk a little bit about some of the space flights that I did, some of my space missions, and what it's like to see the planet from orbit and outer space. And every good astronaut talk starts with launch. And I had been an F-16 pilot and a test pilot, so I thought I had done some cool stuff. But when you launch in a rocket, especially the space shuttle was so big and massive. It was just amazing. It was so cool. It was so loud. There was so much fire. I remember sitting there, the engines start up about 6 seconds before liftoff. And I remember thinking, uh-oh, something really big is about to happen. And then you get launched off the pad. The shuttle put out 7 million pounds of thrust, but it only weighed 4 million pounds. So the acceleration was almost 2 Gs right immediately. It's kind of like laying on your back and having one of your friends lay on top of you. And it was shaking. It was like having another one of your friends shake you as hard as they can. So this is a little video. You can see a little bit what a space shuttle launch was like.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. We have to go reading start. 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Shuttle Endeavour, NASA's final space station crew compartment that brings a bay window view for our celestial backyard.
There was a little bit of clouds above us, and when the engines lit up, the reflection off the clouds was so amazing. For a fun homework assignment, Google STS-130, which was my mission, STS-130, and you could see the home videos that people posted, and they're cheering and screaming. Each one of those big white rockets puts out 10,000 pounds every second. And the small engines on the back of the shuttle itself put out 1,000 pounds a second of fuel exhaust. And so that's 23,000 pounds every second, or about 11 metric tons. So there's a lot of fuel being burned. It's a pretty expensive bill to fill the space shuttle up at the gas station. But it goes pretty fast, from 0 to 17,000 miles an hour in a little over 8 minutes. That's about 8 kilometers every second. So the space shuttle was pretty awesome to ride on. But my launch into space, my journey into space didn't start on the launch pad. It started when I was a little kid. And the first book I had ever read was about Apollo. It was one of those cardboard books you read, in kindergarten or before kindergarten. And I was hooked. I grew up with posters of rockets and airplanes. And I had a poster of the space shuttle, and I had a poster of the original F-16 on my wall of my boyhood bedroom. And I just love space. My parents supported me. They didn't know anything about flying or being an astronaut, but they supported me with Astronomy magazine, and they got me a telescope that I had to learn how to use. And so as I grew up, I wanted to be an astronaut. And eventually I ended up going to the Air Force Academy. I read a book called The Right Stuff, and it talked about how the original astronauts became astronauts. And so I kind of followed in their footsteps. And while I was an F-16 pilot, NASA announced that they were going to have a class. I was actually at test pilot school at Edwards Air Force Base. I was really young. I hadn't finished, and everybody on base wanted to be an astronaut, but they all told me, don't bother applying because you're too young, you're too inexperienced, and these other guys have more experience. Well, I went ahead and applied, and I got lucky, and I ended up getting selected. And a lot of my friends who were smarter than me and they should have been picked ahead of me never got picked to be an astronaut because they didn't apply. They didn't try to do it. And so I learned a really important lesson, and that is, don't tell yourself no. If there's some dream that you have, if there's something that you want to do in life, don't tell yourself no. Tell yourself yes if you do the work that you need. If you want to be a doctor, there's a lot of work you have to do. You have to get a college degree. You have to do well. You have to take the test. If you want to be an astronaut, you have to get a technical college degree. You have to do well in your job. But if you tell yourself no, if you say, well, I can never do that, or that's too hard, I can promise you won't get it. So that first step is really important. And you guys are at just the right age to really learn that and understand that. So I was fortunate. I got selected to be an astronaut. And it was a long wait. I was at NASA for almost 10 years. It was a really long wait. And I eventually end up going here to the International Space Station. You guys can see the space station fly overhead. It's either in the evening right after sunset when the station is up in the dark. The station is still up in the sunlight, even though it's dark down here on Earth, or in the morning when it's still dark here on Earth, but the station is flying into sunrise. And there's websites and there's apps that you can use to find the station. It is a massive, huge spaceship. It's about 1 million pounds. It took well over a decade to build it. My space shuttle flight was the final assembly mission. We actually brought up the last pieces to the space station to call it officially complete. And then I went back about 5 years later on a Russian Soyuz, flew with the Russians on their capsule, and spent that was the mission where I spent 200 days there. So I spent over 7 months of my life here at the International Space Station. And I like this video. I'll just let it play. This gives you a sense of what it's like in weightlessness. I'm building an IMAX camera. Probably the most important thing I did was make this IMAX movie called A Beautiful Planet. It's a great film. If you like space movies, I highly recommend it. But you can see, things just float. And it feels like you're falling, because you're falling. That's what's actually happening. And this is a great thing to talk with your science teachers about. You're falling towards the center of the Earth. It's not 0G. There's still plenty of gravity where the space station orbits, but you're moving so fast that as you fall, you move forward, and you fall and you move forward. And that makes a curve. And if you're at the right speed, that curve is the shape of the Earth, and that's an orbit. So this just gives you a sense. There's all those Ziploc bags to keep track of stuff. If you don't keep track of it, it'll float away immediately. So you really need to have a good grip on where all your stuff is, or you'll lose it. So getting really good at floating takes a few weeks, but it is pretty cool once you do. Exercise is super important. This is me on the treadmill. The treadmill is cool for a few reasons. A, it's on the wall, which is cool. B, it's floating. You see how it's kind of banging around. It's not attached to the side of the station. It's on springs. And this is our exercise machine. That's the same thing. It's floating. It's on springs. And this is my crewmate, Samantha. She's in space right now, actually. but you can do different kinds of weightlifting that you can do in the high school football gym here on Earth. And it's that weightlifting that's really important to keep our bones and muscles from atrophying. Between the treadmill, this exercise machine, and a bike, after 200 days in space, I came back with 0% of my bone or muscles lost. And that's really important, because the space station has shown that astronauts can spend many months in weightlessness and still be healthy. The problem we have is with radiation, and that has not been solved. Radiation is a problem because it can cause cancer, but our bones and muscles, that problem has been solved, which is really great. Cutting your hair is super important. On Earth and in space, it's really simple for me. I put number 2 on the clippers and I got a haircut. But for Samantha, she's an Italian woman. She wanted a proper haircut, so I had to learn how to cut women's hair, and it was very terrifying and very scary. But it came out pretty good. There's some funny videos online. The European Space Agency made a cute high-speed video of me cutting Samantha's hair. This is how you sleep in space. Astronauts have little crew quarters, which are great because you can shut the door and it's your own private space. It's not very big at all. You can see how big it is. But I would get in that sleeping bag, and I'm taking a picture of myself here. But if I were really sleeping, I would put my head inside the sleeping bag, zip it up completely, and go to sleep and float. I would not attach the sleeping bag to the wall or anything like that. I would literally just float. So that was really fun. I was kind of worried if I'd be able to sleep at all. And I would put headphones on and listen to music, which was really awesome. I listened to the Interstellar movie soundtrack. I listened to the sounds of rain from space, but it was really cool sleeping. This is me doing science. This is something called a glove box. The glove box has a glass container that keeps everything kind of contained in case it breaks. I did lots of different experiments. There were 250 while I was there on the space station. And they ranged from medical experiments on my own body to biology, physics, chemistry, and lots of engineering. They had some really cool astronomy experiments. There's one astronomy experiment that's trying to figure out what the universe is made of, how much dark matter and dark energy. So the science on the space station is really fun. And that's actually the mission. That's why we built the space station, was to do science. This is me doing a spacewalk. This is a GoPro selfie, but you can just see how much stuff there is out there. It's really tough to keep track of all this stuff. But the doing spacewalks was amazing. I could talk for an hour about my spacewalks, but it was definitely not anything that I had ever done before. You were out in the universe. You're out in space. There's a little thin plastic visor, like a millimeter thick plastic. And on the other side of that, you would die instantly. So it's an amazing experience to go outside. This is pretty cool. Samantha's boyfriend, Lionel, got us all a present, and he got me this little Lego astronaut, Terry Virts, with a Lego football. He knows I like sports. So that was pretty cool to have my own Lego. This is what it's like to land in a Soyuz capsule. The space shuttle landed like an airliner. That was nice and gentle, and it was good. But this is what it's like inside the Soyuz, touching down on the ground of Kazakhstan. It was a big bang, and it was quite a shock to be in weightlessness for 7 months and then all of a sudden back on Earth. I have a couple of photos I want to share. This is the Cupola Module. It was the module that I installed. 7 windows. It's amazing. It's on the bottom of the space station. So these are just a few of my favorite pictures that I took. This first one is Typhoon Mysak. It was a massive hurricane, one of the biggest ever, Pacific storms. It was just huge. That eye was so well defined. But look in the distance. You see that thin blue line? That's our atmosphere. Look how thin that is. And when you look out, it's really thin. It's amazing how fragile and how thin that atmosphere is. Every human that's ever been is from below that blue line, and there's nobody that's ever been from above the blue line. And so I really came away thinking, man, this is an important planet that we have, and we got to take care of it. And to see how thin our atmosphere is very humbling. These are thunderstorms in Africa, which are just amazing. It's sped up a little bit, but you can see in Africa or South America or the South Pacific, in the tropics, these thunderstorms get so powerful. It's just incredible. It was really incredible to see them. This is something amazing. This is Ireland and the United Kingdom, and the Earth. You can see the Earth because of moonlight, but this is nighttime, and this is the North Pole, and those are the Aurora Borealis. So this is another great thing to talk to your science teachers about. Giant explosions on the sun send out radiation, and it gets trapped in the Earth's magnetic field. There's snow down in Denmark and Norway, and you can see that snow from the moonlight. But anyway, the radiation gets trapped by the Earth's magnetic field, and when it hits the atmosphere, it turns into this green flowing plasma. It's really cool. That's Moscow right there, the city of Moscow. But the northern lights, and you see the southern lights in like May, June, July. You see the northern lights in December and January. And this is the galaxy. That's the moon reflecting on the ocean. At nighttime, you see the thin blue line, but you see a much bigger brown covering, and that's just really high upper atmosphere. It's super thin. You couldn't live. If you were in that atmosphere, you would die immediately. But it's a really thin upper atmosphere. But you could see the center of Earth's galaxy, and it's just amazing. This is actually a clip that I shot for that movie, A Beautiful Planet. I was telling you about the IMAX movie. But there's so many stars out there. I could never make out constellations or whatever. There's just billions and billions of stars. It's really awesome. I took over 319,000 pictures of Earth. They told me I took the most ever. But this is just a photo of Florida, actually. And you can see all the blue, turquoise, really beautiful Bahamas. That part of the Earth is really cool. And this was the last picture I took in space, which is awesome. So I think we have time for some questions and answers. There's a couple books that I wrote. And
all right.
Oh, Joe, I think we got time for a Q&A now, right?
We absolutely do, Terry. We even have time to squeeze in a little Kahoot quiz with the classrooms to see how well they were paying attention. And as per usual, it's just an amazing experience you had, Terry. And we always love being able to share that experience with the classroom. So again, thank you so much for being with us here today.
It's awesome.
So to our classrooms, whether you're in a camera spot or you are tuning in live via YouTube, let's get a little Kahoot quiz going. If you head to kahoot.it, it is going to ask you for a PIN number. And I am going to share my screen right now and give you that PIN number. And then I will talk a little bit more about how you can join if this is your first time. So here we go. Let's get that screen share going. And it's still loading there. There we go. Perfect. So our PIN number for today is 4342361. So 4342361. If you have one-to-one technology at your seat, maybe a Chromebook or a tablet, you can join right there. If not, no big deal. Your teacher could put it up on the front screen, on the projector screen or smartboard, and you could shout out your answers. And even if you don't have a device to connect, you can still shout your answer out and see how you do. What else? 20 questions today. There will be some true and false, some multiple choice. And sorry, not 20 questions, 5 questions, 20 seconds each. If you get the answer right, you're getting some points. If you get it right really quick, you get even more points. If you get it wrong, but you did it really, 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 really fast, we got nothing for you. You got to get that right answer in there. And I can see we've got lots of cool students joining us. They get auto-generated names like the Super Yeti and the Bright Lobster and the Nimble Otter and the Honest Buffalo. Very cool. So we'll give
Space Yak.
Oh, do we have a Space Yak? That is perfect.
I like that.
So that's a lot of pressure on the Space Yak to win this one. The Space Duck as well. I see that one there too. Very cool. Okay, a couple more seconds to get a few more classrooms in. If you are struggling and you have maybe a tablet or a phone, scan that QR code and that'll bring you right into the event. So there we go. I want to start, but I still see a few more students joining. So a couple more seconds. All right, let's get it going because we want a nice long Q&A period. Here we go. First question on deck. Remember, you have 20 seconds and you want to get that answer in as quick as you can. About how much did the space station weigh or the space shuttle weigh before launch? Was it about 500,000 pounds, about 2 million pounds, about 4 million pounds, or about 7 million pounds? So think right back as Terry was telling us about his launch. What did he tell us? We've got a couple more seconds to get that answer in. All right. Ooh, narrow margin. Most went with about 4 million pounds, and that is correct. Let's see what happens to our scoreboard. We've got the Snowy Impala holding down that top spot. Let's go to a true and false question. Terry was selected to be an astronaut on his first application. Is that true or is that false? Got a few more seconds to get that answer in. I see everyone's going nice and fast. That's good. That's going to help your points. All right. That's absolutely true. And Terry, I'm sure you know some colleagues who, maybe applied multiple times before they were selected. And so that's kind of another little message for the students is, don't take failure too much to heart. You kind of learn from it and you try again if it's something you really want.
It is. I've got one friend who applied 5 times. So that took him probably 15 years or something before he finally got picked. So being and persevering is super important. Now, I left NASA a few years ago, retired, and there's some different, I'm working in the energy industry and doing some other things. And man, I hear no all the time. And if you hear no, you have to just say, okay, and work on how to improve yourself for the next time and move on to the next thing. You can't take rejection and let it just crush you. You have to just say, okay, learn from it and move on to the next thing for sure. I hear that all the time now, by the way.
All right. So the Genius Tiger has jumped into first place. Let's go to our next question. About how many days did Terry spend on the space station? Was it 40, 100, 150, or 200? God, we had 75 answers go in there in about 3 seconds. So the students are fast on those buttons today. A couple more seconds. All right. Good job, crew. Overwhelmingly, we went with 200 days. The Genius Tiger is holding on to that spot with an answer streak of 3. Which machine was not on the space station for exercise? Was it a treadmill, a bike, a rowing machine, or a weight machine? So we heard Terry talk about 3 machines that were available to him on the space station. One of them was not mentioned here. You got to pick that one. Terry, how much each day would you say you spent exercising?
NASA schedules you for 2.5 hours a day. So a lot of that is like getting dressed and then cleaning up when you're done. But I would run for 30 minutes and actually lift weights for an hour. And then the rest of the other hour was for cleaning up. But that rowing machine is the answer. But in the future, I didn't use that on the space station, but we may use that going to Mars or in capsules because it's just a smaller machine. You can have a little machine that you're doing rowing. I have a guest that wants to join the class too here. I don't know if you guys can see the golden retriever here.
You bring that up. You're there.
There you go. Say hi, Maple. Say hi. She's not happy that I'm doing this. She wants to go play. But yeah, the rowing machine is going to be potentially what you use because it's smaller in the future. But that's not what we did on the space station.
All right. We have one final question here. That Genius Tiger is not going to let go of the lead, but it's pretty close. So let's see what happens here. This is a true or false. there were about 100 experiments happening on the space station when Terry visited. Is that true or is that false? So we know science is incredibly important on the station. Even on the shuttle, they were doing science experiments.
Yeah.
We know lots of technology that we use today came from different aspects of space exploration and such. So, we had a little bit of a split there. So it's actually, Terry, I think you said around 200 experiments on the go.
250, yeah.
All right. So let's see if that shook up our leaderboard. We had quite a split there. In third place, we have the Stellar Rooster. In second place, we've got the Awesome Elk. And holding on to that top spot, who have we got? The Epic Dragon sneaking in right at the very end to steal that match. All right. Good stuff, everyone. Thanks for playing the Kahoot. Let's switch to a little Q&A action. So if you're tuning in via YouTube, now's the time to send in some questions via the chat. But let's start working through a few of our camera classrooms and take some of their questions. So we're going to go to some 6th graders in New Jersey. We'll let them get things started. Miss Martin's crew. Oh, never mind. They just disappeared. So we will see if they come back. We'll go to Miss Olson's crew instead. They are joining us in Minnesota, some 5th graders. Let's bring them into the call. There they are. Hey, Minnesota, how we doing? Awesome. Let's squeeze in 2 questions while we have you. So who's got the first one?
What did it feel like to exercise on the wall?
Exercising on the wall was really cool. Actually, if you close your eyes in space, you can't tell if you're upside down or right side up, so you have no idea. And once you go on the wall, it takes your brain, it took me about 2 or 3 seconds to suddenly, I wasn't on the wall, I was just running on the ground. So when I was running on the wall, it didn't feel like that at all. It felt like I was just normal. Like I can close my eyes and go on the treadmill and it just feels like I'm just running like normal. And then when I got off and I'd look left or right, it was always like, whoa, I'm on the wall. But as long as you're there, you don't feel it. It's pretty cool how your brain can reorient itself.
All right. I see someone in a NASA shirt up front too. Very cool. You guys have another question ready for us?
I like it.
I can come back too if there's not another one on deck.
You can try.
I have a question.
Say it loud.
How many times per day did you exercise?
How many times per day do I exercise? So they schedule you for one weightlifting session on the ARED machine, on the weightlifting machine, and then one cardio session. And the cardio was either treadmill or bike. So for 200 days, literally every day, I did some cardio and some weightlifting, except for 4 days. The 3 days that I did spacewalks, there's no time for exercise. And to be honest, the spacewalk is much bigger workout than the machines. And then we had a really big emergency. In my View from Above book, chapter 5, I wrote about this ammonia leak emergency. And that was took up the whole day. I didn't exercise on that day. But the other 196 days, I exercised.
All right. Very cool. Thank you to our class in Minnesota for some cool questions.
Yeah.
I see our New Jersey crew is back, so let's bring them in here. If you want to go ahead, I see you put a question in the chat, but if David wants to ask that question, unmute the mic and he can go ahead.
David's coming over. David, go ahead.
All right.
Hi. I want to know if the spacewalk was scary because you're literally so high up above the ground.
If it feels scary. So luckily, I think my personality is just one that I don't get too scared about stuff. When I did my spacewalk, the first thing I did, I went out the hatch. The very first thing I did, I took a tether and I clipped it on the handrail because you're holding on with your hands. So I clipped on the tether and then I let go and I looked down and I looked at Earth. And I just wanted to make sure that I was okay and I wasn't going to be nervous or scared, and I didn't. But that was a pretty, it's pretty amazing to be outside looking down at the planet. When we had the ammonia leak, we thought that was going to actually destroy the space station. So that was kind of an intense day. I remember when I go in my crew cabin night to sleep, every once in a while you'd hear this banging and popping where the structure of the space station would expand and contract thermally because it gets super hot and super cold, and that makes the metal grow and shrink. So that was kind of weird to hear the space station banging that you're floating inside of. And when I did the robotics, when I installed the Cupola Node 3 on that first space shuttle flight, I was the robotic operator. So I took this big arm and I grabbed this module like my Coke can, and I had to move it and attach it. And when I was doing that, the module was only a few centimeters, a few inches from the side of the shuttle because it had shifted during launch, and that was a pretty nervous thing. But I wouldn't say I was afraid. Most of that was just kind of being focused more than it was being afraid.
All right. Our crew in New Jersey, if you do have another question. Oh, never mind. I do see another question. So I'll bring you in if Mira wants to go ahead and ask that question.
Hi. When you were during the launch, when you were doing the launch, were your ears like popping? Because when you're in an airplane, your ears pop. So.
That's right. That's a really good question. So your ears pop because in an airplane, when you climb, the pressure drops. On Earth, the pressure at sea level is the highest, and as you go up, the pressure gets lower. There's less air. And airplanes don't have a great system. There's actually a little bit of leakiness. The air from inside the cabin leaks to outside the cabin, and so it's not 100% pressurized. So when you go up, your ears pop, and when you come down, your ears might hurt because they're getting squeezed by the extra pressure. The space station or the space shuttle and the Soyuz and other capsules don't have that leakiness. They're completely pressurized. And so on the launch pad, they have sea level pressure, which is pretty high pressure. And then when they get to the space station, it's the same pressure. There's no difference. And so it doesn't leak out. So your ears do not pop. Hi, Maple. Not now. I still have work to do.
All right. That reminds me a lot of my Shepherd Lab Mix Griffin, who just doesn't take no for an answer sometimes.
This is the puppy. She just turned 1, but she still wants to play.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Griffin will be 2 this year, and he's still definitely a spunky guy.
Yeah.
Class in Ontario here. We're going to grab a YouTube class. Miss Mills' crew would like to know what you miss most about being in space.
The view. Floating is cool. I love floating, but seeing the Earth is so awesome. I have all my pictures are in front of me. You can't see them. I really loved looking at the planet. I really love photographing the planet, helping to make that IMAX movie, just taking pictures. It was a really cool experience.
All right. Mrs. Burns' crew is hanging out with us. They are, oh, I lost them here. There they are. They are 6th graders. They're in Ontario, Canada as well. Let's bring them in. Hey, Mrs. Burns' crew.
Hi. Okay, go ahead.
I was wondering, what do you guys eat when you're in space?
That is a great question. I have a slide for food, but I deleted it because I didn't have enough time. The good thing about eating in space is that there's lots of variety, and variety is the most important thing. They've got meat and vegetables and fruit, like freeze-dried fruit, and I had Snicker bars that I brought up, and tea and coffee and fruit drinks like Gatorade and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of food you can get. Some of it is just pre-made. You literally just rip it open and eat it. That's like what the military people eat. They're called MREs. Some of it is dehydrated, so it's really crunchy, hard food in little plastic containers, and you stick it in the wall or in a machine, and it fills it up with water and it turns it back into food. But the food was pretty good. It's much better here on Earth, but it was not too bad. And by the way, I just heard you guys are there. I'm going to be in Burlington, Ontario on November 17th doing a National Geographic speech. So if anybody's up there, come on out and see it.
All right, very cool.
You've already seen some of the slides, so you've already seen part of it, I'll have to say.
How did you feel when you got launched up into space?
The feeling of launching is, first of all, your eyes are really big because there's this huge rocket that's burning millions of pounds of fuel. Second of all, you get smashed back. So like I said in my talk, it feels like there's somebody laying on top of you. The shuttle and the Soyuz, the shuttle gets up to 3 Gs. I think the Soyuz is probably closer to 4 Gs. So that's like having 2 or 3 of your friends lay on top of you. And then it feels like someone's shaking you on the space shuttle. It was because there's so much vibration. And then as soon as it ends, as soon as the rocket engines end, you start floating, and that feels like you're falling because, like I said, that's actually what's happening. You're falling towards the center of the Earth. So the feeling of launch is really amazing.
All right, great questions. We've got to bring in Mrs. Stevenson's crew. They're in Dundas, and they're a 6th grade class. So, Terry, we have lots of 6th graders from Ontario because space curriculum is in 6th grade. So let me bring Mrs. Stevenson's crew in there. Mrs. Stevenson, how we doing?
We're doing great. I don't know if our camera's working, but we've got one question here.
Okay.
Go for it.
How did being in space change your perspective of Earth?
That's such a great question. So I think it changed it a few different ways. Like I said, you saw that thin blue line, and that's all we have. Like there's no other planet B. There's no other planet in the solar system where humans can live without a spaceship or a spacesuit, right? The moon, even Mars, Titan, Enceladus, all these moons of Jupiter and Saturn. There's no planet where humans are ever going to be able to just walk around and have their golden retriever, go fetch bones. You're always going to need a spacesuit, and that means that you're never going to have like huge millions of people living somewhere. So we really have Earth, and that's it. So that's one of the perspectives that I had. And the other one is when you see that like we're all on this spaceship Earth kind of flying through space, it makes me realize that we really should get along with each other. And sometimes governments like the Canadian government, the American government, a lot of the European governments are great, and they provide a really good life for their citizens. And then other governments that are dictators, and they're not there to help the citizens. They're there to just help the person in charge. And those are not good. And so I kind of came away with the perspective of we need to figure out how to get these things right so we can have a good life down here on Earth. So those are kind of the two big things that I came away with. That's a really good question.
All right. Mrs. Stevenson's crew, do you want to squeeze in one more?
Yes, we have one more.
Excellent.
Were you able to see other planets from afar?
Yes, really good. So I showed you that picture of the stars. There are billions of stars. I know the basic constellations. I could never make out any constellations. If I turn the lights off, let my eyes adjust, just like on Earth, you have to let your eyes adjust. I couldn't pick out stars, but planets I could pick out really well. I could see all the planets from Mercury out to Saturn. I couldn't see anything beyond Saturn because they're just so small. But I got to know them by colors, which is kind of cool. And I saw Mercury a lot. And on Earth, I bet you the vast majority of humans have never seen Mercury and known what they were looking at because it's always really close to the sun. So if you have trees or buildings, you'll never see it. And if you're in a city, you'll never see it because there's always light pollution. But in space, I could see Mercury every few weeks, and it goes around the sun really quickly. So it was always changing. But, Venus is yellow, Saturn's yellow, Jupiter's orange, Mars is red. Mercury's a little white dot. So it was really cool to get to see those planets.
All right. And Terry, we're going to take one more question from YouTube here from Miss Kirk's crew. So you already talked a little bit about what you ate while you were in space, and there was a good variety, but they're kind of a little more curious about how you ate. Did you play with your food a little bit?
I did. In fact, this past weekend, I did a flight on a 0G airplane. There's a airliner that it pulls up and it pushes over, and you can get about 20 seconds of weightlessness. And I was filming a YouTube video for that. And so I had a Snickers bar. I was spinning it and trying to eat the Snickers bar while we were floating. So I'm basically like a teenage boy. I like to play with my food. So the coolest thing to do is just float the food in front of you, and then you float up to it and grab it with your mouth. But yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. The problem with with normal food, it's fine. If it's like messy food, it'll just explode into a mess everywhere. So you don't want to do that, because then you're the one that has to clean it up. But yes, I definitely like to play with the food.
All right. Well, speaking of being a kid in space, I can't resist this question. Are you Star Wars or Star Trek?
My time was Star Wars. I grew up, I remember seeing the first Star Wars movie as a 10-year-old or 9-year-old. So that was my thing. Although I have all these connections with Star Trek. I was on the final Star Trek TV show, Star Trek Enterprise. I was on that episode. You can Google that. I helped film when the movies came out about 10 years ago. I helped film a special, like the DVD bonus thing. I filmed that for that. And then when I was in space doing my spacewalks, Leonard Nimoy died. Mr. Spock had passed away. And so I did a tribute from him. I did the Vulcan salute with the Earth in the background, and it got millions and millions and millions of views on social media. It was amazing. Because everybody loves Spock. He was such a cool character. So Star Wars was my time, but I have all these connections to Star Trek. It's amazing.
All right, fair enough. Well, Terry, I think we're going to start wrapping things up for today, but you mentioned that you'll be in Ontario in November. So there's lots of Ontario classrooms tuning in, 6th grade classrooms. So if you're anywhere near Burlington, that could be a really fun opportunity to check that out, maybe with your parents. Is there an afternoon one, or is it just evening?
Let me check. Sometimes there's a kid one, and sometimes there's just evening. I am doing a student matinee. So it's schools bring kids there at 1 p.m. and then there's an evening show at 7. And it's through National Geographic, which is sort of connected with you there. So
yep. Yeah, absolutely. I'll send a little message to the Ontario classrooms and just let them know where they can look.
I think the school, like kids can't go on their own. The school has to bring their whole class there.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's start out with a huge shout out to our classrooms. As per usual, amazing questions, both from our camera classrooms and our YouTube crew. Thanks for playing along with the Kahoot and Epic Dragon. Good job sneaking in right there at the end to steal that victory. And Terry, it's always great to have you join us and share a little bit of your adventures with us and kind of bring those perspectives back to us, those important perspectives that can only come when you get to look down and just see really how special what we have is.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's such a cool experience, and I love sharing it. The kids are always awesome. Great questions, guys. And good job on the quiz. I think a lot of people got 5 out of 5, but it was like that split second of how fast you push the button that made the difference.
Exactly. Well, let's see if we can get a little loud. For the classrooms who are still hanging out with us, let's get those microphones unmuted. A big goodbye and thank you. For today.